Why build gallows 2 weeks before the capitulation of the state? On the 9th of April, 1945, the regime continues its purge within the courtyard of Flossenbürg concentration camp. The government removes its internal threats just days before Berlin falls. Guards escort 7 prisoners into the freezing morning air for a prolonged execution. 57-year-old General Hans Oster strips off his uniform, standing bare on the cold stone before the executioners. The guards prepare the instrument of death without rushing. The executioners loop a thin string over a heavy iron meat hook. The wooden gallows in the center of the yard still smell of freshly sawn timber. Camp workers nailed them together during the night for this specific clearance operation. Oster hangs suspended from the wire, enduring an agonizing strangulation ordered directly by the high command. The liquidation runs on schedule, clearing the opposition while the front line disintegrates. Allied forces are already closing the distance to the camp gates. The United States 90th Infantry Division, which had previously landed at Utah Beach and fought its way through France and Germany, advances through Bavaria. They will breach the perimeter of Flossenbürg and secure the surviving prisoners shortly after the executions conclude. The distance to the advancing American vanguard shrinks with every passing hour. Time runs out. 14 days remain until the arrival of the 90th Infantry Division. A thin wire stretches tight. It hangs from a meat hook. The location is a Bavarian courtyard. Here ends a major general. He stands naked, no quick death. The strangulation process takes 20 minutes. He transmitted 20 precise intelligence reports to Western capitals. Not vague rumors, they were exact operational blueprints. The 20 warnings to the Allies contained highly classified data. They included precise dates for an impending Wehrmacht invasion. The military targets were Denmark and Norway. The season was the spring of 1940. Strategic surprise failed. The enemy knew. The source remained unknown. Berlin searched blindly for the leak. He built a vast intelligence network. He leaked crucial state secrets abroad. His reward was a quiet execution. No trial occurred. The authorities buried the evidence. His remains finally reached the Nordfriedhof Cemetery. The grave is located in Dresden. Years after the war ends, the silence breaks. Fabian von Schlabrendorf begins his post-war search to document the liquidated network. Fabian von Schlabrendorf travels across a fractured continent and systematically gathers testimonies from surviving conspirators. How did the Gestapo acquire the exact roster of the opposition? On April 4, 1945, the SS uncovered Admiral Canaris's secret diaries. Names and meeting notes filled the paper. The archive was hidden in a safe at the Zossen military headquarters. This complex housed the primary communications center of the Wehrmacht. Couriers delivered the documents to the Chancellery. Adolf Hitler reviewed the pages. He issued a directive the same day. No military tribunals, no delays. Every imprisoned conspirator faced immediate execution. The liquidation mandate for Flossenbürg arrived 5 days before the hangings, when the security apparatus secured the entire archive. Documenting their own operations guaranteed the intelligence network's collapse. April 9, 1945. American forces were pushing through Bavaria. They would reach the camp in 14 days. Inside the walls, the procedure began before dawn. Guards stripped the prisoners. The camp doctor noted that theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer accepted his fate without physical resistance. Hans Oster stood naked in the courtyard. 7 men walked toward the hastily constructed gallows. 4 officers died from the explosion inside a wooden barracks at the East Prussian headquarters. The names in the diaries led investigators directly back to this event 9 months prior. On July 20, 1944, Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg left a briefcase inside the Wolf's Lair. A heavy oak table support absorbed the main shockwave of the blast, shielding the target. Operation Valkyrie launched, aiming to paralyze the state through the reserve army. The conspirators expected success as mobilized units began securing government districts. Instead, a radio broadcast confirmed that the leader of the Reich had survived. The reserve army, numbering roughly 2 million men, lost its operational autonomy. The failed coup became a strategic catastrophe that dismantled the internal resistance. Gestapo units began systematic raids, targeting anyone tied to military intelligence. The network collapsed. Officers who had built these shadow structures faced rapid interrogations. Hans Oster was taken into custody on July 21, 1944. Why did the internal opposition architect remain in the shadows? The man arrested that July morning wore a Wehrmacht uniform. His intelligence network collapsed early. For years, he built the infrastructure to destroy the state. His rank as Abwehr Major General granted top clearance. He read secret military directives. He used them. He constructed the resistance. He coordinated assassination plots. He smuggled Jews. The military uniform masked his sabotage. He worked quietly. He operated unseen. Execution came later. Oster's true downfall began with the discovery of Canaris's diaries and a chain of arrests that destroyed his intelligence network in 1943. How do you dismantle a spy network inside Europe's most guarded state? One charge of currency fraud is enough. To understand the disaster of 1945, we must return to April 1943, when the Gestapo struck the heart of the Abwehr. Agents arrested Hans von Dohnanyi. The official accusations cited financial crimes. In reality, he smuggled 14 Jewish refugees into Switzerland. He disguised them as military spies and issued state funds. During 1943, the Reich Main Security Office deported tens of thousands of people monthly. Saving 14 civilians using military intelligence was a glaring anomaly. The arrest took moments. Incriminating files lay on the desk. Dohnanyi whispered a single word to Hans Oster. Oster reached out. The papers rustled under his fingers. A Gestapo officer lunged forward. He physically blocked the general's arm, slamming his hand down. The files remained. Oster went under house arrest. The Abwehr dismissed him. His covert network lost its architect. The underground resistance froze. 11 years of intelligence work vanished in 11 seconds. Why did the government in The Hague ignore the invasion reports? Intelligence from an active Wehrmacht general seemed too detailed. The Dutch general staff ignored 20 separate secret reports. 3 years prior, this network shared exact German attack schedules. The data leaks started in 1939. General Hans Oster provided the information. They lasted until May 1940. Bert Sass served as the Dutch military attaché in Berlin. He received the classified data directly. The invasion target zones were clear: the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, France. The Wehrmacht mobilized over 3 million soldiers for the Western offensive. Their movement timetables sat in The Hague for months. The Dutch government doubted the source. They received 20 warnings. They took 0 action. The intelligence was precise. The response was silence. No one moved. On May 10, 1940, German forces crossed the border. Because The Hague dismissed the warnings, 4 nations fell within 6 weeks of the resulting military campaign. Assault group officers waited for the final signal. Their orders were explicit. If the target offered resistance inside the Reich Chancellery, he was to be eliminated on the spot. The decision to leak intelligence abroad followed the direct collapse of an internal military coup during 1938. General Ludwig Beck and his commanders prepared to remove the leadership to prevent an invasion of Czechoslovakia. Secret envoys traveled to London, urging the British government to stand firm against territorial demands. The conspirators promised that foreign resistance would trigger a military revolt in Berlin. Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain flew to Munich, where international diplomacy dismantled the internal uprising. He agreed to cede the Sudetenland territory without consulting the sovereign government. This region contained critical border fortifications and roughly 70% of the heavy industry in Czechoslovakia. Transferring this land stripped the nation of its physical ability to mount an armed defense. The German leadership secured a massive political victory without firing a single shot. Neville Chamberlain stepped out of the aircraft in Britain. He held up a signed piece of paper before the flashes of the British press cameras on the airfield. Exactly 1 year later, this diplomatic triumph in Munich would turn into the start of a global war. The commanders canceled the standing order to storm the Reich Chancellery. Where is the safest place to hide a treasonous network? Inside military intelligence offices under Admiral Wilhelm Canaris. The shadow structure relied on a solid foundation. It was laid within the Abwehr in 1935. Perfectly ironed Abwehr uniforms provided excellent cover. High-ranking military officers wore them daily. Recruitment moved quietly. They brought in army generals. They secured intelligence agents. They targeted government officials. The opposition needed inside sources. They found them. Direct contacts sat inside the Gestapo itself. Hans Bernd Gisevius fed them data. Arthur Neeb supplied internal police reports. Both played the role of loyal officers. They passed secrets. The network expanded. Operations ran simultaneously. The personal cost remained buried. Hans Oster ran this entire operation. He had 2 sons. One fought on the Eastern Front. The Battle of Stalingrad ended. The German Sixth Army faced destruction. 300,000 soldiers fell apart. Men starved. They froze in ruined buildings. Oster's son took a blanket. He covered his head. He shot himself. The death notice arrived. Oster received the message. He still managed the resistance. He dodged Gestapo surveillance daily. He buried his grief. He kept working. The apparatus kept running. How did a state eliminate its own generals in 3 days? Through direct execution orders bypassing legal procedures. The groundwork for an underground network emerged in the summer of 1934 when violent purges destroyed Hans Oster's loyalty. Security squads arrived at the home of Major General Ferdinand von Bredow, former head of the Abwehr. The officers presented no judicial mandates. Volleys of gunfire echoed through the property without anyone reading a sentence. This assassination launched a nationwide operation from June 30th to July 2nd, 1934. State agents dragged officials out of their homes with a complete absence of official accusations or court warrants. SA Chief Ernst Röhm faced a firing squad. Former Chancellor Kurt von Schleicher died from close-range shots, his wife murdered right beside him. During these operations, executioners killed at least 85 people, wiping out the highest SA leadership. The extrajudicial murder of his mentor revealed the mechanics of the government. Oster committed to dismantling the regime entirely from within. To orchestrate resistance from inside military intelligence, Oster first survived the total destruction of his own career. 1932 brought an abrupt resignation. An affair with a colleague's wife stripped him of his rank. No uniform, no purpose. The state officially proclaimed a grand restoration of national dignity. In reality, this agenda demanded prison camps and public book burnings. Adolf Hitler secured the chancellor appointment on January 30, 1933. The disgraced officer initially viewed the new leadership as national salvation. They promised to rebuild the shattered army. This message resonated. Oster joined the Abwehr in 1933. He wore a uniform again. Proximity to the new government revealed its actual foundation. The dictatorship moved fast. Opponents vanished. The state opened the Dachau concentration camp in March 1933, exactly 2 months after taking control. Thousands of books burned in city squares. Crowds cheered the ashes of texts written by Marxists and Jews. He adapted. To his colleagues, his status as the ideal officer became merely a calculated front. That career collapse in 1932 echoed a broader national ruin triggered 13 years earlier. How many soldiers did the victors allow the defeated empire to retain? Exactly 100,000 men defended the entire state territory. While the Imperial Army previously commanded millions across multiple fronts, it now faced a strictly enforced cap of 100,000 personnel. Hostilities ceased on November 11, 1918, but the Versailles Treaty formalized the institutional dismantling on June 28, 1919. Heavy paper volumes of the signed agreement physically crossed out established national borders. Regiments disbanded overnight as soldiers surrendered their heavy field artillery to Allied commissions, leaving vast military barracks empty. The government formally ceded the industrial Alsace-Lorraine region. Before the conflict, this specific territory supplied 75% of the country's total iron ore production. The officer corps was reduced to 4,000 men for the entire nation. Artillery pounded the positions for days on end. The trenches of the Western Front turned into a continuous field of heavy mud. Keeping a military rank under tight post-war limits demanded exceptional combat training. Hans Oster had exactly that foundation. Born in Dresden on August 9, 1887, his father, a Protestant pastor, instilled strict discipline and clear moral borders. In 1907, Oster joined the German artillery as a professional officer. He went straight to the Western Front in August 1914. Gas attacks swept the lines. Incoming artillery shook the earth without a single pause. The Verdun meat grinder of 1916 alone claimed over 700,000 lives on both sides. Survival took more than luck. Oster held his ground. He survived it all. He proved himself in direct combat and earned multiple military decorations for bravery. His frontline experience forged a hardened worldview. By 1916, Oster received his promotion to captain and transferred into the general staff. 53 years passed before a nation legally recognized the righteousness of its executed officers. An aging veteran of the military command stood before the judgment of history decades after the conflict ended. During the Second World War, a clandestine resistance operated deep within the state apparatus. The post-war public judged them. Citizens saw only high treason. The ultimate paradox remained that a sworn officer had to destroy his own state to preserve his people. Wartime sentences held their ground. A new law passed in 1998 officially annulled these convictions across Germany. Complete legal rehabilitation for the internal resistance arrived only at the end of the 20th century.